In 2018, the world's airplane factories reached their peak, rolling out 1,813 brand new aircraft. It was the golden age of aviation manufacturing. Boeing alone delivered 806 jets that single year. Then something broke. By 2024, global deliveries had collapsed to just 1,254 aircraft, a staggering 30% below what the industry had promised. Boeing's output cratered to 348 planes. But here's what defies all logic. Demand didn't fall. It exploded. Airlines around the world are more desperate for new aircraft than at any point in modern aviation history. The global backlog has swollen to a record 17,000 unfulfilled orders, enough planes to keep factories running at full capacity for 14 years straight. Passengers are flying in record numbers. Carriers are begging manufacturers to deliver faster. And yet, every single year since that 2018 peak, the factories have built fewer and fewer planes. Not because nobody wants them, not because the technology failed, but because a catastrophic chain of events triggered by corporate greed, mechanical failure, and a global pandemic shattered the most complex manufacturing ecosystem ever created. And what's truly alarming is that putting it back together may take an entire generation. Here's what went wrong. To understand how the world's most powerful airplane manufacturer destroyed itself, you need to trace it back to one decision. In 2011, Airbus launched the A320neo, a fuel-efficient upgrade threatening to dominate the narrow-body market. Boeing could have spent years designing an entirely new aircraft. Instead, they chose the shortcut. They bolted larger engines onto the 737, a design from the 1960s, and called it the MAX. But those massive engines didn't fit properly beneath the aging wings. Engineers compensated with software, a flight control system called MCAS that pilots were never adequately trained on. The consequences were catastrophic. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 plunged into the Java Sea. 189 people dead. 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed 6 minutes after departure. 157 more lives gone. 346 people killed because Boeing chose speed over engineering. The MAX was grounded worldwide for 20 months. Boeing's golden era ended overnight. But here's what nobody expected. The crisis wasn't over. It was just beginning. On January 5, 2024, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 climbed to 16,000 feet when a door plug violently blew out of the fuselage. A hole the size of a person ripped open at altitude. Passengers' phones and clothing sucked into the sky. When NTSB investigators examined the wreckage, the cause was almost incomprehensible. 4 bolts. The 4 bolts designed to hold that plug in place were simply never installed. Think about that. A $100 million aircraft left the factory missing 4 bolts. Anyone with a wrench could have tightened. The FAA immediately grounded 171 aircraft, froze Boeing's production expansion, and launched an aggressive audit. The findings were devastating. Non-compliance across manufacturing, parts handling, and product control. Boeing failed dozens of checks, but the rot extended far deeper than one factory floor. At Spirit Aerosystems in Wichita, Kansas, Boeing's primary fuselage supplier, whistleblower Santiago Paredes, was finding hundreds of defects every single day. Missing fasteners, dented pressure bulkheads, foreign debris inside supposedly finished components. Former quality auditor Joshua Dean raised alarms about improperly drilled holes. He was fired. The message was unmistakable: stay quiet or lose your job. By 2024, Boeing had hemorrhaged $47 billion in operating losses since those first fatal crashes. They were forced to reacquire Spirit for $8 billion, effectively admitting that outsourcing the heart of their aircraft had been a catastrophic mistake. But Boeing's implosion was only the beginning. What collided with Boeing's collapse made everything exponentially worse. When COVID-19 shut down the world in 2020, airlines cancelled orders overnight. Suppliers panicked. Companies across the industry slashed 40 to 50% of their workforce. Precision Castparts, a key Boeing supplier, eliminated roughly 40% of its workers. In previous downturns, the industry always won back its people when demand returned. Not this time. These weren't ordinary workers. They were specialists who spent decades mastering the art of building aircraft components to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. When they left, many retrained. Others retired permanently. The institutional knowledge they carried, expertise that took a generation to cultivate, vanished with them. And it isn't coming back. Today, 65% of aerospace companies still cite personnel shortages as their greatest challenge. Over 29% of the remaining workforce is above 55, approaching retirement. The industry isn't just short on workers, it's hemorrhaging irreplaceable expertise faster than it can train replacements. But the workforce crisis was only the first shockwave. In late 2023, Pratt & Whitney discovered something terrifying inside their geared turbofan engines powering the Airbus A320neo fleet. A rare contamination in the powder metal used to forge critical components was causing microscopic cracks that could lead to catastrophic failure. The consequences were staggering. Over 600 aircraft grounded at peak, one-third of the entire GTF-powered Airbus fleet sitting idle or in storage. Inspection turnaround times that once took 60 days exploded past 250. Airlines grew so desperate that some began dismantling brand-new $55 million aircraft just to harvest engines worth $20 million each. The total cost exceeded $6 billion. Here's what should have happened next. With Boeing crippled and engines grounding Airbus planes worldwide, you would expect one manufacturer to surge ahead and fill the void. Neither could. In September 2024, 33,000 Boeing machinists walked off the job in the company's first strike in 16 years. 53 days of complete shutdown across every Boeing production line. The cost exceeded $5 billion. Boeing announced 17,000 layoffs. Meanwhile, Airbus watched helplessly as its own suppliers buckled, pushing the target of 75 A320neo aircraft per month from 2026 to 2027. Production actually fell below 40 per month. Total cost to airlines from these cascading failures reached $11 billion in a single year. The industry was drowning in demand it physically could not satisfy. The damage from this cascading crisis didn't stay inside factory walls. It spread to every airport, every airline, and every passenger on Earth. If you flew on a commercial airline recently, there's a good chance your aircraft was older than it should have been. Much older. The global fleet's average age has climbed to a record 14.8 years, far above the long-term average of 13.6. That sounds minor. It isn't. Older planes burn more fuel. They cost substantially more to maintain. They break down more frequently. and the fleet replacement rate has dropped to just 3% annually, half the normal 5 to 6%. Airlines aren't flying aging jets by choice. They simply cannot get new ones. The numbers behind this shortage are staggering. The global backlog has swollen to 17,000 unfulfilled aircraft orders, a record dwarfing anything the industry has seen. At current production rates, clearing that backlog would take 14 years. Before the pandemic, the average wait was 6. Airlines that ordered planes expecting delivery within a few years now face waits stretching into the next decade. Carriers are fighting each other for any available aircraft. Narrow-body lease rates have surged 20 to 30% above 2019 levels. Approximately 5,000 planes, 14% of the entire global fleet, sit parked and unusable. 700 of those are grounded specifically for engine inspections. But here's the consequence almost nobody is discussing. For decades, the aviation industry achieved steady annual improvements in fuel efficiency. New aircraft burned less fuel, produced fewer emissions, pushed the industry toward its commitment of net zero carbon by 2050. That progress has stalled. Between 2023 and 2024, fuel efficiency flatlined for the first time, breaking a trend that held for over 30 years. Every month, airlines operate aging fleets instead of receiving cleaner replacements. The gap between ambition and reality widens. The industry's environmental promise is being undermined not by unwillingness, but by the inability to get efficient aircraft into service. There are glimmers of hope. Boeing recently posted its first quarterly profit in over 3 years. The FAA has begun easing production caps. Airbus recorded its strongest deliveries since 2019 through mid-2025. But the structural damage runs deep. Deliveries projected for 2025 still fall far short of forecasts. Expertise lost during the pandemic may require a full generation to rebuild, and 17,000 orders won't fill themselves. Here's the uncomfortable truth the aviation industry doesn't want you to hear. Building an airplane isn't like building a car or a smartphone. Every single aircraft contains millions of precision-engineered components assembled by workers whose expertise takes years to develop and decades to master. When that ecosystem broke, it didn't just slow down, it shattered, and no amount of money, ambition, or corporate urgency can fast-track the rebuilding of skills that were lost, the supply chains that collapsed, or the trust that was betrayed. The factories aren't building fewer planes because nobody wants them. They're building fewer planes because the intricate human and industrial machinery required to build them safely was dismantled by a combination of corporate recklessness, a global pandemic, and mechanical failures that cascaded through every tier of the most complex manufacturing network on Earth. The recovery has begun, but it will be measured in years, not quarters. And every month of delay means airlines fly older planes, burn more fuel, and fall further behind on their promise of a cleaner sky. But this is only one piece of a much larger story reshaping how the world moves. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.